Good evening. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and call the meeting to order. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business, and is not to be considered a public meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. At this time, if everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chambers, would you take roll, please?
Mr. Nichols.
Present.
Ms. Pritchard.
Present.
Mr. West.
Here.
Mr. Ross. Ms. Parkhurst.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, if I could entertain a motion to go into a brief executive session to consider the appointment, employment, and compensation of a public employee or official.
I'll make motion.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Chambers, when you're ready.
Do we have to announce who's coming to the meeting? No.
Okay, Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please excuse us for a brief executive session. We will return. Thank you. And we're back. Thank you for your patience. Next item this evening is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held February 7th, 2022. Would someone please make a motion for these minutes?
I'll make a motion to
Thank you.
approve the minutes
Thank
from
you.
the February 7th, 2022 regular meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. West. Are there any changes or comments regarding the minutes from the board? Okay, hearing none.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkers?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, does the board request any additions, removals, or modifications made to the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Aye.
Ms. Parkers?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sable, you're up.
The first item tonight, I'd like to reintroduce to the board the redistricting and facilities process. We put together a presentation on discussions that we started having approximately 3 years ago. If you'll remember correctly, the facilities redistricting and the next strategic plan was discussion that we started having right before the pandemic began. The pandemic hit us right as we were having our first community and staff meetings, and it put the entire process on hold. As we moved through the pandemic, although some of the process was on hold, we felt it was important that we continue to move forward with some initiatives, especially the academic as well as the planning initiatives. So we did move forward with our Portrait of a Graduate as well as our strategic planning initiative, and we were able to complete those processes during the pandemic through virtual meetings. The board has already approved our Portrait of a Bee, which is actually on the board back here. And we intend to present the strategic plan to the Board of Education for approval at either our May or our June meeting, as the current plan lapses out of date. And we're looking forward to doing that. So now all of our focus as we move forward with this process is going to go into the facilities and redistricting. Ryan? So why are we looking at facilities and redistricting? And our reasons for this are the same as they were prior to the pandemic. We take a look at what's going on across the district in terms of our enrollment. We did have a study done on enrollment in the district and projections for the future. Our enrollment is staying fairly consistent. We're right around 6,700 to 6,800 students across the district. What we are seeing is a shift in our population. This is especially notable at our elementary buildings. So our outer ring buildings are seeing an increase in student population. Those tend to be our newer buildings. That's where we're seeing more newer development. Our inner ring elementary buildings are seeing a decrease in enrollment, which tends to be our older buildings. In addition to that, we have been looking at equity across the district. When I bring up equity, oftentimes people think of race, but I'm not just talking about race, I'm talking even more so about social economics. We are very fortunate to have neighborhood schools in our district, but with neighborhood schools, it can develop some inequities when you have all the same students from the same neighborhood attending the same school together. With those equity challenges, it can create some financial issues in terms of availability of resources for students within those buildings. It could be anything from fundraising monies to parent volunteers to PTOs. So it's not always what you might think it is. Of course, as a school district, we always make every effort to provide equal resources and equal access across the district, but there's some things that are out of our control, and we attempt to balance that out, and redistricting may be a way for us to address some ways to do it. In addition, increasing academic opportunities for all of our students. This goes back into the equity piece. Again, if there's more financial resources through volunteering or through donations at one building than another, that may lend one building to have more opportunities than another building. For instance, you talk about something like 3D printers, which we have in the district. We are very fortunate that many of our PTOs have been able to provide those for many of our buildings, where we have not yet been able to financially provide those to all of our buildings. So some of our buildings fall a little bit behind, and it doesn't mean our buildings won't all get those resources, but it moves some of our buildings ahead of others. The other thing that we face with our schools is disparity in class sizes. So when we have a large amount of schools, a major challenge we have on a yearly basis is trying to balance classes. That's because if you are offering only 2 second grade classes in one building, you have to make some tough decisions. You can either offer 1 large second grade class or maybe 2 small second grade classes. We're in another building where they might offer 4 or 5 second grade classes. It's much easier to balance those classes out. So redistricting could even out the number of classes. So maybe instead of 2 in one building and 5 in another, you have 3 in each, so we can better balance those numbers out. The other thing that we want to look at, and this is especially important, is the long-term stabilization of student enrollment across the district. What's very important to our team and to our committees is that we really are looking long-term. We don't want the district to have to, or the community to have to explore redistricting just a few years down the road. We think it's vitally important that we are looking at a long-term plan to address district and community needs, to create stabilization and stability for our students, so that these major transitions or potential major transitions won't need to happen again. The other piece of this situation is upgrading facilities and, of course, taking into account safety and security while we are doing that. And we did have the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission come in and evaluate all of our buildings. And I think most of our community knows that we do have a variety of buildings in the district, some that are very old and some that are newer. And our staff does an outstanding job in the upkeep of those buildings. But obviously, as a facility gets older, the needs become greater. And sometimes just finding parts to upkeep those facilities becomes much more of a challenge. So looking at our facilities and making sure they are at the level that we want them as a district and as a community for all of our students across the district is another important piece, and also fits in that equity. And then potential future reduction of operating costs as well. When we look at the number of facilities that we're currently operating and the enrollment across all of our buildings, I think it's important that we have some difficult conversations about if we should continue operating all of our facilities the way we currently are, or if there are opportunities to decrease costs by maybe combining some facilities just because of a lack of need of those facilities. It's important to make clear that no decisions have been made. These are the reasons why we're talking about this. So these are the discussions that we need to have as we're moving forward and that we're going to have as we're heading into the spring. So student enrollment. Student enrollment is moving towards capacity, as I said, towards the outer ring. So we're looking at Blake, Northrop, and Waite. Meanwhile, it's decreasing at Canavan, Fenn, Garfield, and Heritage. And this has been a trend over the past 5 years. Probably the most dramatic decreases in enrollment that we've seen, probably number one is Garfield, where we currently have approximately 200 students attending that building. And the second one is probably Fenn Elementary. Currently, like I said, student enrollment over the next 10 years is projected to stay the same. However, in recent meetings with city and city development, they've shared with me where some new housing projects are going up, and they are continuing to go up in those neighborhoods, Blake, Northrop, and Waite, where we're already at or reaching capacity. So you can see that we're in a position where we have no choice, but we have to redistrict. When we discuss things like our facilities, and if we want to make any adjustments to our facilities, whether it's building or whether it's facelifting a building, those are decisions that we need to make along the way, and those are discussions we need to have. But the thing that definitely needs to happen is redistricting. Timing-wise, because we know we have to redistrict, I think it makes sense to talk about our facilities now as well, since we know we have to talk about making some adjustments to our redistricting anyways. In terms of our enrollment, we did ask the OFCC to do another enrollment study for us. Since we've gone into the pandemic, and it's been a couple years since they did the last enrollment study, we thought it would be a good idea to get an updated enrollment study, and they're going to be doing that for us this coming fall. Late fall, early winter, we anticipate having updated numbers. So when we have those numbers, we will work those into our current figures, and we will update the board and the community with those numbers as well. And of course, the number one thing that we want to do is provide the best academic environment for our students and staff. And if we are going to make any changes to our facilities and do any construction projects, we would have to put a bond issue on the ballot, and that's a decision that the Board of Education would have to make. We are working with the OFCC, so we have reached out to the state to get support with funding. We are, however, considered a wealthy district by the state of Ohio, which means we're not eligible for full funding and we're not eligible for immediate funding, which means in order to do projects, especially with our need for redistricting to happen very soon, we would have to self-fund those projects. We would be looking at reimbursement for a percentage of those projects. Right now, we're looking somewhere in the range of 20 to 23%, depending on where the rates are at when we would lock in with a plan. And we would anticipate receiving that reimbursement anywhere from 6 to 10 years from now. So that doesn't sound good, but it is good. And the reason why I say that is, yes, we need to upfront the money in order to do these construction projects. But again, remember, I talked about that long-term thinking. And if we're looking long-term and down the road with redistricting in our facilities, we're putting the district in a good position, because we're not only preparing our students to be stable long-term, but we're also preparing the finances and the funding and the upkeep of the facilities for the long term, knowing that those funds are going to be coming in right around a time, a 10-year span, when we know it's going to be time to do some work to those facilities to continue the updates and upgrades to keep them in good operation, which won't have to come from the community. The OFCC has a rating system, how they determine whether a facility should be facelifted or whether it should be rebuilt, and it's all based off of cost effectiveness. and they use a 67% rule. So if a building is 67% or more than the cost to construct a new building, then the OFCC's policy states it is eligible for replacement. And we do have several buildings that fall within this category, and they are listed here on this PowerPoint. The one I do want to point out is Canavan just barely made that percentage at 69%. I'm not sure Canavan would be eligible any longer. It was barely eligible. Since this time, we have made upgrades to Canavan with roofing projects and centralized air, which we were able to do with ESSER funds just this past summer. And we are in the process of reviewing the OFCC's prior reports and making updates to update all of these percentages. Right now, I would not recommend to the board to do any rebuilding over at Canavan. It's a great facility that does a nice job housing our students on a wonderful piece of property. I do think that we do need to have some conversations about some of these other facilities as we move through this process. And what's linked here, I'm not going to go through these tonight because this would take quite a bit of time, but these are all links on the presentation to the detailed reports from the OFCC. This entire presentation, once we're finished with it tonight, before the end of the week, will be posted on our district website. And I do invite our community as well as our board to visit all of these links and look in detail at these reports. As we and when we receive updated reports as we go through these, we will post these on the site as well and make them available. We did update our timeline from what we previously had. If we had followed our timeline pre-pandemic, we actually would have had a bond issue on the ballot this past fall, assuming the board's approval and the community's support. Obviously, that did not happen. So this spring, our main goal is really re-engagement. We need to communicate. That's what our goal is through the end of the school year. We have reestablished our district committees. This is the same structure we had in place prior to things halting to a stop. We have an executive committee, which is a small group of administrators that works directly with the OFCC as well as our architectural firm. We are working with an architectural firm, which the board had approved last year as part of this process. Just because we have an architectural firm, that doesn't mean we're doing any plans or planning or anything like that. They are simply helping us through the process because that's what they do. They specialize in working with school districts and school district construction. We then have a larger administrative committee which meets less often, and that executive committee brings that information back to the administrative committee to sort through all that information. And then we have an expanded committee. And that expanded committee is actually our district facilities committee, which we have 2 board members that currently sit on that committee. And we are in the process of expanding that committee. We've already added additional principals to that group. We're going to be adding additional staff members to that group. We are, in addition, also going to add students to that group. And those are all individuals that we had as members of that group last time before this process stopped. We're going to have communication to the community, staff, students, and parents about the whys and the purpose. So we're going to have a presentation very similar to what I'm doing here this evening. We're actually talking about utilizing this presentation and making it available on social media as well as our website so people can watch it. I do anticipate we'll have some virtual meetings with the community. In addition, we already have scheduled building meetings with staff that we're going to be holding next month in April. And we have asked our building principals to hold student meetings at all buildings. So we're going to be doing that at the elementary buildings all the way up through the high school. We also have a stakeholder survey, which will be going out after spring break. And we have created that survey and are in the process of polishing that survey up. We are going to be presenting to the board the feedback that we get this spring in May and or June so that we can gauge the temperature of where the community's at, which I think is vitally important. Prior to going into the pandemic, there seemed to be a level of excitement about looking at our facilities and the discussions about potential redistricting. And we want to see where people are at now, especially after what we've all gone through the last couple of years. Again, we know we need to redistrict, but is everybody still on board and engaged with some of the larger projects that we were discussing and looking at? So fall next year, 2022, I discussed the virtual presentations already. Those will be happening in the fall. We'll be distributing an additional survey to stakeholders to gain feedback on the overall redistricting proposed plans. And we will be selecting a general plan to move forward with. And I'm going to share what those plans are. And we're not starting from scratch. We came up with those plans at the last round when we started doing this, and we've got 3 general plans. So what we need to do is select a general plan that we want to move forward with so we can start working out the details of that plan. And I'll talk about that in more detail in a little bit. So student, staff, and community roundtable discussions to gain detailed feedback. So once we know the general plan that we're moving forward with, then we need to have the more specific, smaller group discussions about what that actual plan is going to look like. And then we'll also at that time have the enrollment projections, the updated enrollment projections, which will factor into the development of that specific plan. And then the winter of 22 and spring of 23, we'll work with Fanning and Howie on detailed plans that can be shared with the school and community. So at that point, we'll be potentially looking at actual drawings, whether we're looking at specific facilities and changes to facilities, or whether we're looking at boundaries and changes to boundaries for enrollment purposes and be able to start sharing those out. And we will submit at that time the more specific plans to the OFCC. Once we submit those specific plans to the OFCC in the winter of 22, spring of 23, that's when we lock in with our percentage rate for reimbursement with the OFCC. So that date is extremely important. And this timeline was really set around that date and told to us by the OFCC when we met with them several weeks ago. So then 23 and 24, we do have a plan, but it gets a little more cloudy because we have a lot of decisions to make before we get to 23 and 24. Potentially, though, an issue would go on the ballot within this timeline of 23 to 24. With community support. If the community passes a bond issue, then construction and upgrades could begin. The other discussion that we need to have with the community as well as with the Board of Education is that we know we've got an operating levy that is coming up. Right now, according to our forecast, we are looking at the need for an operating levy in 24, 25. So we have well carried that operating levy beyond the 10-year period that we had promised the community. And we've gone well beyond that in terms of no increases in terms of tax dollars. What is concerning to me, though, is that in this situation, we could be looking at having a bond issue on the ballot one year and then an operating issue on the ballot the following year. That's a major concern to me. Just statistically, if you look at other districts, that doesn't spell out success for the operating levy. And I'll speak this loud and clear. If I have to choose one, I'm choosing the operating levy. We have outstanding educators in our district, everywhere from our bus drivers, custodians, to our teachers. And obviously, our students benefit and our staff benefits from being in the best facilities possible, creates the best educational environment, but they'll make the best of the environment they have. We can't educate our kids without our people, though. So our people have to come first. So we need to have some discussions about how we would handle a bond issue as well as the operating levy. The operating levy is going to be vitally important. It's different than the last time we put an issue on the ballot. The last time we put the issue on the ballot, we were not looking for new money, and we were talking about staying status quo for a period of time or adding things. Where this time with an operating levy, we're going to be talking about, if it doesn't pass, we're going to have to reduce. So that's going to be a very different position because we have been working on a negative balance for the course of the past several years, because we did make a promise to the community that we wouldn't come to the community for new money until we needed it. So we basically have been living on our savings while increasing services across the district over the last several years. One option that I am going to bring up tonight that Dave and I have dabbled into a little bit as a possibility, just to get the board members' wheels turning a little bit, is we could potentially put an operating levy on the ballot early with the bond issue, but not have it start collecting until we need it. So essentially, the voters would vote for it early before it would collect. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that that's one of the options that we're going to need to discuss. What I don't want to do is start collecting on a levy before we need it. So the plans. In the spring of 2020, the district committees began presenting 3 general redistricting facility plans to stakeholders for review and feedback. The purpose of the plans was and is to select a long-term pathway for the district prior to putting a detailed plan in place. So here they are. This is the part, at least last time, that everybody really wanted to see. The first plan that we had developed was the green plan, and it is basically the status quo plan. So with the green plan, we basically don't make any major changes to the overall structure of the district. It's basically about redrawing the boundaries for the elementary buildings. So we would be redrawing the lines of where students would be attending to equal out the student populations at all of the elementary buildings. Now, within this plan, it's that basic, but there could be all kinds of things that could still happen within this plan. So when I say that's a general plan, there's a lot of detail that could still happen here. That doesn't mean you're not doing anything with Claggett. That doesn't mean you're not decreasing the amount of elementary buildings. That may not mean that you're not doing facelifting or construction to one of the elementaries. So within this plan, you could go really basic with it, or there's 100 different things you could do within this basic scenario. And then the second plan is the yellow plan, which is consolidation. So the consolidation plan is decreasing the amount of elementary buildings. It is transitioning the district to a 5-6 building, commonly referred to as an upper elementary building, and a 7-8 grade building, a middle school building. Likely, if that would happen, route would be the 5-6 building, Claggett would be the 7-8 building, just simply by location. We would want the 7-8 building close to the high school for resources and classes and things like that. Medina High School, in any of these scenarios, would not change. In order to do this scenario, we would need to do construction both to Root and Claggett for sure, because they wouldn't have the capacity to hold the number of students that would be at each of these buildings. We know for sure we would be able to decrease the amount of elementary buildings under this model because we would have less students at each of the elementaries. This is kind of a long-term plan because it does provide flexibility in terms of enrollment at the elementaries because of the decreased enrollment that would occur across all of those buildings. And just like the green plan, there's 100 different things you could do within that yellow plan. And then the gray plan is going to grade level buildings. And what we had discussed under this plan is having a 1-2 grade, a first, second grade level building, a 3-4 grade level building, a kindergarten preschool center, a 5-6 building, and a 7-8 building. So it would be transitioning away from the traditional community schools that we currently have and going to grade level buildings. We wouldn't want to completely eliminate the community schools, especially for a district our size, and that's why we're looking at 2 grade level buildings. So it would still have some resemblance to what we have had in the past, but it's definitely the most consolidation out of the three models. And again, the high school model would continue to be maintained. So those are the 3 general plans, and again, with the gray, there's still a lot that could be done, 100 different ideas, details within those plans. Our goal is by next fall to have selected, whether it's green, yellow, or gray, a definite direction to go, and to finish out the tail end of that timeline. I know a common question that I get is, when are we going to actually redistrict and make changes? And my answer is not next year. But what I do want to have is by the end of next year is to be able to tell people when that process is going to start. And the key to doing that is the selection of that general plan and direction that we're going to be going, because that's going to drive how we're going to handle the redistricting process and how we're going to handle, or if we're even going to do anything with our facilities and with construction. And again, this PowerPoint is going to be located on our website, and we are going to be making the rounds with our staff as well as with our community and our students to get this information out there. And then there's going to be lots more to come heading into next year. And at this time, I wanted to see if there's any questions from our board in regards to this process. I know I just gave you a lot of information.
Thank you, Mr. Seigel. It's hard to believe that we did start that about 3 years ago. And I think when the schools were shut down, we had the community meeting planned that evening or the next evening, and things got kind of put on hold. So it is refreshing and exciting to be revisiting these again. I did have a couple questions. One, regarding the OFCC and the evaluation that they did, I don't imagine they're going to do another building evaluation. You said that we'll be updating it just by projects we're doing. And what about cost increases? As we've known, I mean, everything's going up right now. So will that get factored in as well?
Yes, all of that will be factored in. Prior to the pandemic, they did an extensive study on all of our facilities. So they sent a team of professionals in, and they spent time in every one of our buildings, going room to room, looking at furnaces, looking at HVAC, everything, and assessing those facilities. So what they're doing right now is they're working with Mr. Whitaker and his department, and they're going through those reports, and they're looking at the projects that we've done over the course of the past 3 years, and they're making adjustments based off of the updates that we've made as a district. Changes in costs, which we're all feeling, will be factored in. It's one of the reasons why the OFCC won't lock us in until we give them that finalized plan. So they will continue to make adjustments until the very end.
Thank you. The other thing, I'm sorry, that I wanted to mention was also the enrollment study that they're going to do. I know they're going to update that. And I think it's important for the board and the community to realize that Medina is a great place to live. And because of that, no one wants to leave. So that's why when Mr. Seigel talked about the inner ring versus the outer ring, we're seeing everyone's staying in Medina in the city. That's where our inner ring schools are. Their kids are graduating, moving on, and residents are staying, and there's no new homes for young families to move in. But out in the townships, that's where we're seeing the growth because there's land and there's buildings and whatnot. So I expect that probably when they come back with revised numbers, we're still going to see that trend continuing. Thank you.
I have just one question, and I mentioned it to you about possibly putting all the 6th grade in Garfield. Did that come up at this any of your meetings?
No, but that is a welcome conversation at any of our upcoming meetings for sure. Yep. And if there aren't any further questions at this time, I'd like to invite Mrs. Cassidy up to talk about a new high school course offering.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Since the last time we talked in January, when I introduced all of the new high school courses for next year, another course idea came up that we wanted to present to the board. This is a service learning class. This would be a half-credit, one-semester class. And what the service learning class would be, students would be able to research problems that are going on in the community that they feel passionate about, and they would go and do service projects outside of the school day to try to help that situation. And we thought this would be a great class for students since it goes so well with our Portrait of a Bee. It meets so many of our competency standards. Students would be working on group projects. They could work on individual projects. And again, this is just an extension of our portrait competencies. So are there any questions about this course?
I have a question. Since the registration guide has been out online and it was very clear in that it was just going to be student council, how have we remedied that to try to get other students other than just student council kids?
Right. So we did originally the class was going to be for student council kids and other kids, but we did take the for student council kids, that part of it out of the registration guide.
And we'll just go on. When is when registration is going to finish?
I believe it's the first week in April.
Okay, so there is a chance. Have there been any announcements that this course has changed and it's now open to anyone who wants to seek service credit?
I don't know that there has been any announcements at the high school, but it is open. So if anybody knows anybody who would be interested in taking the class, they're more than welcome to register for it. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Cassidy. Also, at the curriculum committee, you mentioned the community service seal.
Oh, that's right.
If you don't mind adding information about that, thank you.
So all high school graduates need two seals on their diploma in order to graduate, and one of the seals is the community service seal. And if they have 20 hours of community service, then they would be able to earn that seal for their diploma. So that would be another positive for them. Thank you for reminding me that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Seigel. Mr. Chambers?
As you all know, we did not close January until after the January meeting, and I provided you with the financials or a summary of the financials for January. The bottom line is that the true day cash estimate was at 216 days. This is up from December by 51 days, but down from last year by 36 days. Going on to February. We just got February closed here last week. You can see a trend going on here. It's our new financial system. We're still trying to get used to it and balance our books and everything before we present to the board here. So let's start out by saying the district bank balance increased by $19 million in February to $79,134,000. This is $293,000 below last year at this time. The general fund revenues were above last February by $4.08 million. All revenue sources except for other revenue, which includes interest earnings, account for this increase. General fund expenditures were above last February by $312,000. To me, that's good because, you know, we've had increases go through and everything, and only $312,000 up. I'm looking happy here. Personal services, benefits, capital outlay, and other funding account for the increase. The sales tax fund balance is down to $3.1 million. The district spent approximately $177,000 in February, with the majority going to combi ovens at the high school, Claggett, and Fenn. And our cafeteria supervisor is ecstatic about that because she also received that grant that the board passed last month for combi ovens at other facilities. The rec center capital fund balance increased by $160,000. The district received $4,700 in reimbursement from the city and spent $1,375 on a pool sand filter. So I take it that the filter that we use is all sand, and that's probably the best filter for a size pool that we have here. I don't know. Steve will argue with me. I don't know. The district received a whopping $24,000 in investment income in February. The total collected for the current fiscal year is approximately $265,000 below last year at this time. I'll leave it at that. The district has a general fund true days cash estimated to be about 243 days. This is up from January by 26 days and below last year by 10 days. Questions on the finance? Okay, before we go on, I'd like to talk about a resolution that's out there as an action item. I know Mr. Seigel was talking about future bonds, but I want to talk about past bonds. In 1999, the district passed a $77 million bond. At that time, it was used to, I believe, increase the size of this building and work to renovate Canevin. In 2005, those bonds were refunded. And then again in 2013, those bonds were refunded down to $40 million. Resolution that I have out there for the board is to refund the bonds one more time. We're looking for a bond that will not exceed $15 million. Well, $15,080,000. The reason for the refunding is we are able to do it at this time, unlike home mortgages where you could go out and call your mortgage company and get a refund anytime you think the rates are down. With municipal bonds, there's a certain period of time that you could do refunding. We're coming up upon the period of time for our bonds here, the 2005 bonds, or sorry, 2015 bonds, 13 bonds. And I know the rates have increased here over the past 3 months. So what this resolution will do will allow our bond counsel and our underwriters to wait for rates to go down, which we saw here over the past week that rates sort of took a dip. So we're hoping that rates will go down a little bit more and allow for refunding of the 2013 bonds to be advantageous for the community. So questions on this? Thank you.
Okay. At this time, we have board communications. We can go around the horn if you'd like to add anything or give committee updates.
Sure, I'll go. The Foundation and Student Council sponsored the Hall of Fame on Saturday night. It was, again, a great event, and I'd have to thank Mrs. Busby and Mrs. Debnar for all their hard work in putting that together, and Nancy Valentine for presiding. We honored 9 great people in the community, and 2 who didn't go to school here but have contributed greatly, in Dr. Gardner and Mr. Knight. The foundation has 2 more events coming up. One is April 9th, which is Magic Gives Back, and then May 6th, the Run for Fun. You can register online for those. I got to attend right before the ice storm came in, the orchestra concert with Rick Claggett and the high school. While I'm not much of a string connoisseur, I will say that the kids did an amazing job performing. I also would like to remind everybody, spring sports are going to start. Please get out and support those individuals. The track teams, lacrosse, rugby, tennis, that might be it. Boys volleyball. Please get out and support them like we did in the fall and the winter. And I know it's coming up in the retirements, but I got to visit Northrop a couple Fridays ago, and one of the things that Mrs. Halleck pointed out was what a great job her janitor, custodian, Mr. Sprankle does, and that he will be missed greatly there. He does such a great job. And also a shout out to the girls gymnastics team for finishing second in the state to a perennial winner, Brecksville, but they are closing that gap, so hopefully next year maybe they'll get a chance. That's all. Thank you.
All right, I have a couple things I wanted to point out. First off, congratulations to Hall of Fame inductees for 2019-2020. Congratulations to the National Merit finalists. And thank you to the students that have committed to serving into the military within the last month. Congratulations to the March Students of the Month. Also, Jean had mentioned, congratulations to the gymnastics team. They, runner up. That's nothing to scoff at. That's amazing in the state. And also, congratulations and thank you to all of the winter sports that took place. And it's just always nice to have sports around. I was in sports when I was in high school, so wanted to say, put out thank you for the boosters, had given a check to student council, sizable check, to help with things that go on throughout the year, like prom, that I know is starting to heat up, and there was, I believe there was a meeting for prom last week. Debate team, I think that they had a debate right after our last meeting and did extremely well, so congratulations to them. And I wanted to mention the Medina County Art Show for students is going, I believe, through the 27th. Make sure that you get out, you support the students, see their artwork, see what is happening and what's being made within the district. And a FYI, which kind of ties into the curriculum committee update that I had, was the homework help has officially been launched as of March 1st at Claggett and Root. After school, I believe it's an hour after school. So that's an awesome program that just recently launched that I think can really help our students and should definitely look into taking advantage of.
So, since our last meeting, there was, I believe, 2 facility meetings that we sat in on, and Mr. Seigel went over a lot of what they talked about the last 2 meetings. There was a couple other things. I know that the district's looking at an HVAC automation system for the whole district that'll integrate in with the existing equipment. There was a lot of, still a lot of roofing and paving projects that are coming along. That never ends. I believe I don't know if it's finished, but it's getting close. The Root and Claggett camera systems are, if not done, they're being worked on, I know, by Mr. O'Call and his team. Close. Also, shout out to Mr. Shields. After our last board meeting, I mentioned the sidewalks there along Union. And he got with the city and the district worked together to get those sidewalks cleared. And I was really glad to see that because there was kids walking in the street, and that was a real safety issue. So it was nice that the city worked with the district and they worked together collaboratively. And I think I stopped and talked to him, and he said that there was a few of the residents that came by and meeting and mentioned that, gave thanks for that because it was rough. This afternoon, I attended the MHS Genders and Sexuality Spring Snack Break put on by Mrs. Ayler. That was a nice thing to go to and make sure that, every student, every day, I think that's important. They had several speakers that were very interesting. And then this past weekend, I attended the Jazz Mataz here at the PAC. With Mr. Locker, Ms. Snide, and Ms. Blasco, and saw the Root, Claggett, the Jazz, Root and Claggett jazz bands, the jazz ensemble from the high school, and the Stardusters. I didn't actually get to see all 4. I did get to see my son perform. I was helping out in the snack bar the whole evening. They were running short, so that was fun to interact with the public and just talk to people and whatnot. So. Next year, go to the Jazz Mataz, or if they go back to the dinner and all that jazz, we got some really good jazz players here. That's a lot of fun.
Thanks, Andrew. I just wanted to continue my shout out to our staff, from Mr. Seigel down to our lowest ranking staff member. In the classroom or outside the classroom. I know you're all working hard throughout this year, and it does not go unnoticed. It's so much appreciated. And I see a lot of you throughout the day when I run by or come to a meeting. I know next week is a break, so do something. Just get away and enjoy it. So it's a well-deserved break. And I hope you have fun. And then the other thing I had is, as everybody mentioned, I wanted to thank Coach Ranello and the girls' gymnastics team because second place in the States is very impressive. And Coach Ranello has a history of placing high and just shows that the hard work of the girls pays off and they have something to cherish for the rest of their lives. So, and who knows, maybe next year they're knocking on the door. Next year, maybe they'll kick it in. So congratulations, Coach, and to the girls' gymnasts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. To continue with that, I believe the girls' gymnastics team, the second in the state, is the best of any girls' team in the county. So that is wonderful. There were some wrestlers that made it down to state and swimmers. And our debate team, so it's been a busy winter, and we have a lot of student athletes that have done some great things this winter. And yes, so a couple of things that I had the honor of attending. The Hall of Fame night, Ms. Pritchard mentioned, was Saturday night. And again, thanks to Mrs. Busby and everyone, the committee who helped put that together. And we do have some very talented graduates and community members, and it was wonderful to recognize their achievements and their service. And one thing I learned is I did not know that Ms. Pritchard was the founder of the event. So thank you, Ms. Pritchard, for that. That is a big undertaking, and we're grateful that you took that on. So thank you. Additionally, Ms. Pritchard and I attended the policy committee meeting this past month. We went through the first reading of policies. We will have the second reading of those policies as part of the committee in April, and then you can look for those policies for a first reading at the April board meeting. Curriculum, Mr. Nichols and I attended, where Mrs. Cassie presented the service learning course that we heard earlier. Dr. Tadona was there as well, and Mr. Seigel shared some legislative bills that are really still in committee, I think, for the most part. But there's a lot of education bills out there, so I encourage everyone to find out about those, and I'm sure we'll get some updates as those move along in the process. But there's a lot of things going on in our legislature that will affect our schools and the education system, public schools right now. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we've talked a lot about our facilities and a lot of the upgrades that are needed, but we do a lot of work, and our district does a great job of keeping our facilities maintained for our students. And I think it does show what great facilities we have when we are a host site for the basketball tournaments for OHSAA. I mean, that is just great exposure for our district, as well as the Medina band, the competition, OMEA. Thank you, Mr. West. The OMEA competition, I believe we had about 24 schools from all over Northeast Ohio here, and that was just so phenomenal, because our Performing Arts Center is just a fantastic facility, and to be able to host all of those schools, it was just so organized and well run, and it's just such a great facility to hear a performance. That was really, really neat. I'm glad I had the opportunity for that, and I did not hear how our band did.
So while I was waiting around for my son, because he played with the symphony band, when they got out, we heard a big cheer. I don't know which of the three pieces it was, but one of the three pieces they played, the judges said it was the best one that they'd heard. They hadn't heard it better played. They did really well. And the PAC, the acoustics are just phenomenal. It's a great place. It's a great place to perform. So, but they did really well, and there was 16 to 20 high schools here, or groups. Some schools brought multiples, like Medina had 3. They had the concert band / freshman band, concert winds, and then symphony, and a couple others had 2 or 3 too. So it was we didn't hear all of them, but I just know that there was there, so it was a good time.
Thank you for clarifying that. And there were 3. I forgot there were 3 of our bands performed, so it was a great night. So I encourage everyone to. I know we have lots of spring concerts coming up and Strings in the Park, and it's great to see a lot of our buildings having their activities and things brought back now with the nicer weather. And everyone should try and, as Mr. Ross said, get out and do something, relax, but also take in some of the great things our district has to offer. Thank you. Okay, it is now time in the agenda for public participation. Community members wishing to address the board are asked to abide by the following guidelines. When you approach the podium, please state your name, address, and affiliation. Please keep comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. All comments are to be directed to the Board of Education and not to any one individual. Comments shall focus on areas that have not previously been brought forward to the board by the individual or associated group, and comments will occur. Yes, okay, that's everything yes, thank you. So it looks like we did have someone sign up. Joe Freeman, would you like to approach the podium and please state your name and address? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name's Joe Freeman. I'm a current 4th-year student at Ohio State University. I'm majoring in finance and African American studies. I'm also a graduate of Medina High School in 2018. I'm one of 4 children. My mom and dad are Charlie and Jeannie Freeman. My mom teaches middle school at Claggett. She teaches French and Spanish. And my dad was formerly on the board, as you all are aware. Part of the reason why I've been so set up for so well set up for success is due to Medina's staff, teachers, coaches, whatever, such as Mrs. Turner, who taught me my lunch. She taught me my lunch code. She taught me my lunch code for when I was in Mrs. McClintock's class in kindergarten, and I know it seems like benign, but I'll never forget that. And another reason why is because of the coaches such as Nick Kaplak. I know recently you all voted to suspend his supplemental contract, I believe. I don't know if that's the correct verbiage. But I'm here to say that Coach Kaplak's one of the greatest coaches I've ever had the chance to play for. He's part of the reason why I'm so set up for the success I'm about to enjoy in my corporate career when that begins, when I graduate. I've been reading all the articles you guys have been documenting about the incidents and whatnot, and I understand and I hear why that's troubling for some of you. For most of those incidents, I was there, and what occurred is different, but that's rather here nor there. What I want to tell you guys is that at the end of the day, I always knew that Nick Kaplak had my back and he had his team's back, and I can't say that for every coach I've played for here. And that's something I haven't had from just anybody. Coach Kaplak's a very special coach. He's a very special man to me. And I've just grown up watching him. I've watched him lose his temper, as any coach will. I've watched him win, as any coach will. I've watched him lose, as any coach will. But I've never, in the years of knowing Coach Kaplak, seen him talk to a player in a belittling or a degrading manner. I believe that was the verbiage used in the February 9th article posted by the Medina Gazette. But I'm here to say that I never once felt that that's what Coach Kaplak was after. I will tell you that Coach Kaplak and I do speak frequently, and last year before the season started, he called me and told me that this team he was about to undergo the season with was going to be more successful than the Elite 8 team that I was part of that's still up on the wall and I'm still so proud to be a part of. I laughed at him and I told him that that's a big thing to say, and he said that the talent on his team's all there and that he has expectations are through the roof for those guys. I also noticed that in the February 9th article on the Gazette, it was the Hudson incident that was cited, which happened to be a tune-up game before their first playoff game, and they lost said tune-up game. Coaches at any level aren't going to be happy post-game with their players. I know there was probably some explicitive words said by Coach Kaplak, but pretty much every other coach in this high school has said those same words. I've heard it myself, whatever. The reason why I loved Coach Kaplak as a coach is because as a player, when you just put your head down and you worked hard, you were rewarded, which is how life should go, but obviously it doesn't go for that most of the time like that. What Kaplak wouldn't stand for is when players would disobey the law, mouth off, get in trouble with teachers. He would bench them, and they usually met with a stern punishment. And that's when players, because I had to deal with this my senior year because the same thing happened, that's when players started getting mad because he was mean to their kids who were disobedient to him or to other players or to teachers or whoever. I was one of the captains, so Kaplak always brought me in on these incidents. Whenever something was going on with a team, with a player, with a parent, I was also contacted by parents who weren't on the team to share any information that could lead to Coach Kaplak being fired. I deleted those messages because I want nothing to do with that. I don't take part in witch hunts. To me, Coach Kaplak has been under this microscope. I mean, really it started my junior year with that incident in Vero Beach with Highland, but that's a whole nother thing. But I guess what I'm kind of getting at is that if you're firing him because he wasn't producing the record that you guys wanted out of the baseball program, that's one thing. But if you're firing him because of he said, she said from parents, I'm here to tell you from one of his successful athletes, he is not the man that these people are claiming him to be. The reason I'm so passionate about this is, first of all, I've had the privilege through my Ohio State program speaking with professors and teachers everywhere, K through 12, upper education even, and everyone's talking about this developmental issue we're having with the pandemic group of children. I'm going through college. I mean, I'm still developmentally behind. I've also talked to teachers who said their 9th grade students are acting like 6th graders. Their 8th grade students are acting like 5th graders. And what you need when you have students like that, is someone such as Coach Kaplak who will tell them, you know what, that behavior isn't acceptable. And I know what's done is done and he's gone, but he's one of the few coaches that I knew that was left at this school that would stick up and put his foot down if there was a kid who was bad-mouthing somebody. The other reason why I'm so passionate about this is because when my dad was going through it on the board as the president with the Randy Stepp debacle, Coach Kaplak was one of the few adults to come to me while I was in school and say, you know what, Joe, I know your dad isn't a horrible person like people are writing on Facebook. And to me as a student, when I felt like my last name was being stigmatized, that meant a tremendous amount to me, and it still does. That's him and John Leatherman were the only two people to say something to me, and that meant the world to me. So I know the decision's been made on Coach Kaplak, or maybe it's not. There's other players who agree with me. I don't know. I haven't been reached out or asked to give my opinion about Coach Kaplak. I would love to. I'm sure you guys can kind of gauge how I feel about him. But yeah, I'm just kind of disappointed that he's going to be not the coach anymore, and the people that are replacing him are kind of the two guys who've been under his wing the past 20 years, Coach Arthur and Coach McMullen. So they're both great guys, and I love them, but I just hate seeing Coach Kaplak lose something that he loves to do. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chambers, time for Treasurer's action items.
Yes, if it please the board. Item number 1, Treasurer's Report. It is recommended the Board of Education approve the January 2022 and February 2022 Treasurer's Reports. Item number 2, Supplemental to Permanent Appropriations. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the following supplemental to the 2021-2022 Permanent Appropriations. You'll see items here for food service. These are monies that they don't have monies coming in, but they have monies going out of their general food service account, and so we're increasing their general food service account. You have principal fund items here. You also have the Ohio High School Athletic Association. This is for playoffs that they participate in, and they receive money, so they need to pay the people that work the playoffs. We also have our auxiliary service. These are their final funds for the year. And then our school safety grant. This is a grant that came in 2019. They're looking at spending the rest of the monies. Item number 3 is a fund-to-fund transfer. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the following fund-to-fund transfers. The first is our annual $100,000 that we pay into our rec center fund, and then both the city and the school donate $100,000 apiece, and we operate the initial expenditure and are reimbursed by the city from their funds. The sales tax fund, permanent improvement fund. This is an ongoing fund that we have on a yearly basis. I looked back in June, and it was a bad June. So I missed this in June. Sorry, Chris, I know you're looking at this saying, yes. So we're doing it now, and I'll also have one coming this June for the upcoming year. Basically, this is monies to fund the athletic field. Last time we funded the athletic field, the general fund had to come up with, I believe it was over $600,000 at a crack. So we're looking at building up reserves for the athletic field when it comes due. And item number 4 is the resolution accepting the amounts and rates. This is the bond issue that this is the resolution from the county. When the board met back in January at the organizational meeting. After the organizational meeting was a budget hearing. That budget was the development for these tax rates that the county is presenting. And basically, it's recommended that the Board of Education adopt the resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor for tax year 22, collection year 23.
I make a motion to approve the treasurer's action items.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Chambers, I have one regarding the transfer for the turf. I'm glad to see that the administration is doing that. Do you recall when that was that we put the new field down? I can't remember. 2017. And is it a 10-year life?
I believe we're quoted approximately a 10-year life. We did get the thicker padding on the bottom and regular maintenance to hopefully extend that life if we can, but
Thank you.
it gets a lot of usage, so.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Mr. Chambers?
Yes, Ms. Pritchard.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Mr. Nichols.
Aye.
Mr. West.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next action item is the refunding bond that I was talking about. It is recommended that the Medina City School District Board of Education approve the authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $15,080,000 of bonds for the purpose of advancing refund a portion of the school district's refunding bond series 2013 dated February 20th, 2013, originally issued in the aggregate principal amount of $40,699,551.50 for the purpose of refunding a portion of the school district's refunding bond series 2005 dated April 21st, 2005.
Make a motion to approve action item I.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none?
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Action item number 1 is donations. It is recommended that the Board of Education accept the following donations. I would like to point out the large amount of donations for our Makerspaces. I'm really impressed with how our parents and our community has stepped up and worked with our buildings in making sure that our Makerspaces are well supplied. I know our PTOs have played a large role in our building principals and working with our PTOs as well. I would also like to thank our very own board member, Andrew, for your donations to Makerspaces, as well as 2 computers as well, which are being utilized here at the high school.
I was told they would be, so.
In addition, I'd like to thank the foundation. We have 2 donations on here from the foundation. Both of them are for classroom grants. The first one is almost $1,400 to the high school, and the donation is going to be used to purchase flexible classroom seating to provide student-oriented learning environment in support of mental health and comfort in the classroom. In addition, we have approximately a $350 donation from the foundation to Garfield Elementary that's going to be used for Read a Book, Grow Your Mind, which is a week-long literacy event that promotes growth, mindset, vocabulary development, and motivation to read. And it seems like on every single agenda, we've got our high school student council making some sort of a donation back out to the community, and they are doing that again to the Children's Center of Medina County, and it's always nice to see our student organizations giving back. Number 2 is the new course offering as presented by Mrs. Cassidy at the top of the meeting. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the new high school course offering for the 22-23 school year. Number 3, field trips. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following overnight field trips in compliance with Policy 2340 for the 21-22 school year. I do want to point out that 2 of these field trips have already occurred. They were due to state tournaments and meets. The first one is for the swim team at the district meet, and the second one was for wrestling. We also have upcoming during spring break our baseball team going to Myrtle Beach, and then softball to Olentangy. We have multiple service agreements on the agenda. I do want to point out to the board that these are listed a little differently than they have been in the past. We consolidated the agenda and listed them all together within one item. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following service agreements. The first is a no-charge item that hopefully is going to save the district money, and it's to be a part of a national co-op to get more power in joint purchasing. The big one on here that I'm excited about, and I think our parents will be excited about, is Transfinder. This is a $43,000 purchase with an annual fee of $14,700. What the Transfinder is a GPS system that is going to allow parents to track their children's bus once the bus gets within a certain circle or range of their household. So they'll be better able to predict the arrival of their child's bus. Currently, we're sending out text messages when buses are running late or if there's adjustments to the buses. So I think this will really streamline and modernize the system. I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago where Mr. Travis, our transportation director, came in and presented to the Board of Education about some changes he was making within the transportation department to modernize with GPS systems on the buses. One of those steps was the ability to track every bus in the fleet from his office. This is another step in the process which allows parents access to be able to see when their children's buses are going to be able to arrive. And I believe parents can even set it up so that the system will send them a message on their phone when the bus is like 5 minutes out. The other contract I want to point out is Language Learning Associates Stars and Stripes program. This is a larger contract. This is required services that we offer every year during the summer for special education. And then the last one on here, Medina County Career Center. This is our collaborative efforts at the middle school level for Project Lead the Way. And I want to thank our curriculum department. This is something that they've worked on both at the high school and both middle schools over the past, I want to say 2-3 years, to really implement these Project Lead the Way programs and expand them at the buildings. And they really benefit our kids, and it's nice to be in partnership with the Career Center to make that happen. It helps us financially, and it helps the Career Center as well. Personnel. We have a long list of personnel this evening. The first, non-renewal of supplemental limited contracts. It is recommended that the Board of Education allow all one-year supplemental limited contracts to expire at the end of the school year, including all head coaches. This is an adjustment from the past. Traditionally, the board has non-renewed limited contracts on an annual basis. That has included head coaches, but it has not included head coaches that are teachers within the district. This recommendation now includes head coaches that are teachers in the district as well. Our intent is to continue to keep our high quality teachers that are head coaches. I don't foresee our coaches seeing much of a change. However, this does align our process across our system in regards to how we are handling supplemental contracts. The personnel section, as you see here, is quite lengthy. It's because the non-renewal of all the supplemental contracts across the district, whether it's athletics or whether it's curriculum development positions. We also have, because it's that time of year, multiple retirements on the agenda. I'm counting right now, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 retirements on the agenda this evening. And I want to invite our Director of Human Resources, Mr. Shields, up to talk about our retirees this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Seigel. We've got a great group of employees, 8 tonight that are retiring. 5 are support staff, 3 are teachers. I'm going to try to go through and give you a little bit of background about each of these retirees and thank them for their years of service here. I'm going to start with our from the low end of service to the high end. The first person I want to talk to you about is Becky Leach. Becky is retiring with 9 years of employment with the district, and I say active employment with the district because Becky really started about 12 years ago, but came in at a time where after a year we were doing some layoffs, so she was laid off as a para after starting as a para at Canavan. She was called back and worked as a cook at Root until she could get back into the para classification, and she went to Northrop Elementary School at the preschool, did that for several years, had to take a leave of absence due to some personal reasons, came back and was at Fenn for a year until there was an opening at the Northrop preschool again, and then Becky is now able to retire from that spot where she spent the majority of her career, which is Northrop preschool. The next person I want to talk about is Beth Jewell. Beth is actually a Medina High School graduate. She worked at Old Phoenix Bank before she came here. This was a second career. She's been here working as a paraprofessional at Root Middle School for 10 years. The entire 10 years at Root, she told me the thing she's going to miss most as she retires after 10 years at Root is middle schoolers. She really loves that age group, and she said she knows people think she's crazy when she says that, but she says she has really enjoyed it. At 11 years is Cheryl Garrison. Cheryl is our Blake cafeteria manager. She's been here 11 years. First couple years she was a cook at Blake and then became the cafeteria manager. And the interesting thing about Cheryl is this is her second retirement. She worked 25 years at Medina Hospital in the food service department. Her goal, she told me, is both at the hospital is to make people think that hospital food is nowhere near as bad as what they think. And she said she had the same mission here, and she did a really good job. She makes the best homemade soup if you ever at Blake, and that staff and students are so spoiled with her homemade soup. And she said at the hospital she made everything from scratch as well too. But wish her the best on her second retirement here. 25 years at the hospital, 11 years at Medina City Schools. The first teacher I want to talk about tonight is Susan Toth. Susan's a special education teacher at Medina High School, retiring with 20 years of service in the intensive needs classroom here at the high school. She actually did a long-term sub for us, so she has an additional year before her 20 years of being hired, and before Medina, she worked at Triway Local Schools. Sue and we call them the Susan Toth, Susan Klingshire, and they run our intensive needs unit here at the high school. Their classrooms are right behind the main office. There's nothing better if you ever want to be cheered up is to stop in their classrooms. They run the Buzz Cafe where they sell coffee and drinks and cookies, and puppy chow is their special recipe that they've taught their students to as part of their learning process there. They twice a week, Buzz Cafe. I can't recommend it enough, and Susan Toth's a big part of that. Ms. Pritchard mentioned Jim Sprankle from Northrop Elementary School. He's our head custodian there. He's retiring with 24 years of service. Jim is also a Medina graduate, and he came back, started at Claggett part-time, also worked in our print shop before becoming in 2001 the head custodian at Claggett. That was the high school where he graduated from. He takes amazing care. He treats that building. He was so proud to be back at the building where he graduated from, and the level of care and the cleaning and the maintenance that he did was just great. And in 2014, he moved over to Northrop for a new building, and I think it was probably the best thing for him because he was obsessed with trying to keep Claggett looking as great as possible. He's still pretty obsessed with keeping Northrop as looking as great as possible too. But Jim is just one of those guys. He's such a team player. I want to share one story about Jim is that when he saw the Northrop staff having a hard time with some behaviors and students where teachers had to get involved and it was really taking a toll on him, on his own he went and learned student de-escalation techniques so he could assist. He was worried about, at an elementary building, he had primarily a female staff, and he was worried about their safety and the toll it was taking. And so he volunteered to go do that and has been a huge help and another great resource at that building. And again, he keeps that place meticulous. Just a great guy. We're going to miss Jim so much. Our next retiree is Vanessa Seigel. She's retiring with 24 years of service. Vanessa is currently the secretary at H.G. Blake Elementary School. Vanessa started in 1998, spent about 3.5 years at Claggett as the secretary, and then she had the opportunity to be the second staff member hired at our new elementary school. We hired the principal, Kathy Wetta, and they had about a year ahead of time to start planning and getting everything set, and we were opening our first new elementary school in years. So she and Kathy worked together. They actually were on the second floor of the old Phoenix Bank building planning for that year in advance. But when Kathy Wetta retired a few years ago, it made Vanessa the longest continuous serving employee at Blake Elementary School, and she was pretty proud of that title. So she's having a hard time deciding to retire and lose that title after, because Kathy was hired first and Vanessa second. But we thank Vanessa for 24 years of service to this district and playing a huge part in the smooth transition and opening of Blake in 2002. Our next employee is Jill Heisey. Jill Heisey is at Fenn Elementary School. She's a special education teacher. She has 29 years of service in Medina. Jill started with the county ESC for 1 year. She worked with Black River, but was assigned through the ESC here in Medina to a unit that was closing, and she found out Medina was hiring that year. She came to Fenn, has been in the same room teaching the same subject for 29 years. She also had a previous career where she was a nurse for several years before she went back and decided to go into teaching and a career in special ed. She is the most nurturing, caring person to both her students and her paras. She has several paraprofessionals that work with her, and she takes very good care of the paras in her room and appreciate them so much. And again, so nurturing to our intensive needs students at Fenn. She's going to be a big loss from Fenn Elementary School. And our final person tonight who has the most longevity is Tammy Patrick at 34 years. Tammy is at Medina High School. She's an intervention specialist in special education. She's also the department chair of the special ed department. The interesting thing about Tammy is it's 34 official years, but she actually, all her time has been at Medina. She student taught at Garfield and Canavan when she was in college. We had a long-term sub job for her where she started at Heritage and finished out the year. And she was about to be offered a job at Heritage when the high school principal at the time was Dave Lorenzi, called her up, and he knew her because he coached her in softball when she was a teenager. And he said, listen, come to Medina High School, try special ed for 1 year. Because she was against it, did not think she would like it, had her mind set on elementary. 34 years later, she's still at Medina High School doing special ed. Just another person who's such a great advocate for our special education teachers and does a great job. So I've at least talked her into coming in sub. The other ones I tried, but they're going to let me know if they want to sub. But Tammy doesn't know what she's going to do without being at Medina, so she did tell me she would be glad to sub for us. So just a really amazing group, over 160 years of service to this district, a couple Medina High School graduates, and just the people that make this place so special. I thank them all for their service. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And the last thing I just wanted to mention is we've been having some discussion in terms of our retirees, and next year are considering, rather than recognizing our retirees at each meeting like this, having a recognition at our final May meeting next year, and actually inviting the retirees to the meeting so that you all can put some faces with the names and maybe having a cake and some punch or something. So if you have any questions about that, just let Amy and I know. But I think it would be nice to have them here to celebrate them. And that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Seigel. Can I get a motion for these action items, to approve these action items, please?
I'll make a motion to approve superintendent action items J1 through J5.
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments about these action items? Just a couple of comments I wanted to make. Regarding a couple of the service agreements, I wanted to say that I appreciate the collaboration we have with the Career Center on those PLTW classes at the middle school and the classes at the high school. It's great that we can provide additional opportunities for our students that way. Serving on the Career Center, I know that not all the districts take advantage of those programs, so I'm glad that we're able to do that. Thank you, Mrs. Cassidy. I know you've got a hand in that, so thank you. I also wanted to give Mr. Travis a shout out because I know he's always looking for ways to help improve transportation, make sure it's safe and efficient, and provide whatever he can for our parents and our drivers. So I appreciate all of his efforts there. Congratulations to our retirees. And I was just reading something someplace that we talk about it's the people that make a place. And I think that's really true here at our district, and it's evident in our staff and in the people that are retiring. So thank you, Mr. Shields, for sharing information about them. And I think it would be great to have a year-end celebration because we do have some great staff here and we need to celebrate their accomplishments. Thank you. Mr. Chambers.
Mr. West?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion to move to executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, and discipline of a public employee or official, to consider the investigation of charges or companies against a public employee, or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual, and discussion with the board's legal counsel of disputes involving the board that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
Second?
Actually, are you making the motion, Mr. Ross?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nichols. And Mr. Ross will second.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for attending this evening. We will move to executive session. When we return, we will not be taking any action. Enjoy the nice weather out there, and thank you again. Have a good night.